Hello, True Health Seeker, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Learn True Health podcast. I am so thrilled that you're here today to learn from Dr. Bradley Nelson and his emotion code, how you can heal physical illness through healing the emotional body. And he has just thousands upon thousands upon thousands of testimonials on his website. You can check out hundreds of thousands of people around the world that have had amazing results. So you're going to love today's interview. Now, I got to tell you about a special that's happening right now. If you've been a listener for a while, you've heard me talk about the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. That's the online health coach program that I took to become a health coach. It's either a 6-month program if you're a full-time student, or if you're like me and you're a busy mom or dad or just busy with school or career, and you just want to be able to become a health coach but fit it into your very busy life, then you would take their year-long program. It adds up to about 20 minutes a day of videos and audios. And over the course of that, you learn over 100 dietary theories, but more importantly, they teach you how to be an amazing health coach from the standpoint of counseling, of that emotional side of health coaching. Because really, everyone knows to drink more water, go to sleep early, and eat vegetables, but why don't we, right? So what's going on there? And you teach your clients how to create new healthy habits that stick, and how to go through the emotions to get to the point where you've increased their joy and vitality in every area of their life. And that's something that IIN will teach you how to do as a health coach. Now, I was surprised to find out, because I've interviewed the CEO and also the founder of the Institute for Integrative Nutrition. It was very interesting for me to find out that about half the students take their year-long health coach training program just for their own personal growth, because the program offers so much personal growth. So if you want to become a health coach just for your personal growth, you can absolutely do that by going to IIN. Or if you want to become a health coach, you can also go to IIN. Now, they're having a great sale on right now for the month of February, so you're going to want to call them and check it out. They already offer a great discount for my Learn True Health listeners. So when you call IIN, just mention my name, Ashley James, and Learn True Health podcast. But right now they're giving my listeners an even better deal for Valentine's Day. And of course, isn't that so appropriate this month? We're all focusing on the energy and vitality of love, just bringing in more love and joy into our life, and focusing in on maybe a bit of that romantic love, but also the familial love, the love for friends and family, especially the love you have for yourself, right? So let's do some self-care. If you want a free module from IIN, you can go to learntruehealth.com/coach. That's learntruehealth.com/coach, and check it out. And if you want to learn more, give them a call. Just Google IIN. Their phone number comes right up. And those who answer have actually been through the program, so they can help you. Awesome. Thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you so much for sharing this podcast with those you care about. Let's help as many people as possible to learn true health. Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 455. I am so excited for today's guest. We have with us Dr. Bradley Nelson. I absolutely am thrilled to introduce you to his technique, and you should get his book, The Emotion Code. You can also go to one of his websites, which is emotioncodegift.com, and he gives you some great free goodies. Dr. Bradley, I'm really excited to have you on the show, because in so many cases I've seen where people can heal their body on the physical level when addressing emotional blockages, and when going in and healing things on an emotional and mental level, and even spiritual and energetic, everything comes back online. The vitality of the body and the joy comes back online. I've seen so many people with chronic pain, when they address the emotional side of their chronic pain, even though for years they've been going to chiropractors or getting acupuncture, or maybe even getting injections of, some kind of steroid. But when they address the emotions, the pain went away. And it's absolutely fascinating. I even had a woman on the show recently talked about her PhD thesis was scanning people's brains while they did emotional work, and saw that the pain would actually leave the body. She could see it in the brain. And that sometimes that chronic pain was in the emotional centers. It lived in the emotional centers of the brain. And how fascinating is that? And this is something that you specialize in, is helping people to heal on the emotional level, like we should be focusing. We focus on healing the body physically. We should be focusing that much effort, if not more effort, on making sure we're healthy emotionally. And I'm thrilled that today you're going to teach us more about your technique, the emotion code. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Ashley. It's really great to be here.
Absolutely. Now, you have this really fascinating story that led you to, both personally and professionally, led you to where you are today. And I would love for you to share with our listeners so they can fully understand what happened in your life that had you become the healer you are today.
Well, it really started when I was 7 years old. I was really sick with the measles, and I'd overheard my parents talking, and I knew that the plan was I was going into the hospital the next day, and I was going into something called an oxygen tent. You know how it is when you're a kid and you overhear your parents, and they don't think that you're listening, but you are. So I knew the plan. So that night, I was lying on the couch. My parents had made a bed for me on the couch so that I could be near their room. And I'm lying there on the couch, just feeling really sick. And everyone else had gone to bed. My parents came into the room, and my mother said to my father, she said, "Honey, will you kneel down with me and say a prayer for our boy here so that he'll be able to get well?" And so they did. Now, knowing my dad, I'm sure it was probably the first time that I'd ever heard my dad pray. But my dad was a really great guy, but he just was very kind of just sort of private in that way. And anyway, here they are. They're kneeling down by the side of the couch. My dad is praying for me that I'll be able to get well. And in the middle of this prayer, I had this unbelievable thing that happened. It started at the top of my head, and it went whoosh through my body to the soles of my feet. And I was healed just instantly. Now, to go from being really sick one moment to being completely well in the next moment is just so bizarre and so impossible and so unforgettable that I remember that like it happened yesterday after all those years. So I held my tongue till my dad was done praying, which didn't take long. And when he was done, I said, "I'm better. I'm totally better. I'm totally better." And they said, "That's fine. Go back to sleep. Tomorrow you're going into the oxygen tent." But the next day proved it. I was totally well. So I filed that away. What I learned from that experience was that there is a higher power that we can draw upon. And that higher power goes by different names. And I don't think that it really matters too much. I think that we all have that capacity that we can ask for help from that invisible higher power. So that's what I learned. So fast forward about another 7 years. Things tend to run in those 7-year cycles, right? And I started having these pains in my back that were so extreme. They'd come out of nowhere, and they would take my breath away or put me on the ground. I mean, it was like being stabbed with a knife or being run through with a sword or something. It was really extreme. And my parents took me to the hospital. And they ran all these tests on me, and my parents were told that I had kidney disease, that it was about 50% fatal, I found out years later from my mother, and that they had nothing to offer. There was no medical treatment. And my parents were told that my kidneys were either going to survive or not. And if they didn't survive, I wasn't going to survive, basically, because there was no, they didn't do kidney transplants back then. It was a long time ago. And so my parents decided that they would take me to see some alternative doctors, some holistic doctors. Now, these doctors were actually a couple of old-time osteopathic doctors. Now, if you go to an osteopath nowadays, it's pretty much, in most cases, it's like going to a medical doctor. They prescribe drugs and so on. And there are some of them who still do some of the things that the old-time osteopathic doctors used to do. Their profession was a lot like chiropractic is now back in those days. And what happened was I think it was in the early 1960s or maybe the late 50s, the medical profession basically came to the osteopathic profession and said, look, why don't you just join us and we'll make you like us and you can prescribe drugs and so on. And so they did. But these two, it was a man and a woman, and I never really knew for sure, but I think they were kind of fond of each other. I think they had a relationship. I never knew. But they stayed out and didn't want to have anything to do with becoming like allopathic medical doctors. And so they stayed out of it. And they practiced out on the edge of town in a wheat field in a trailer house. And I remember sometimes going there and there would be a busload of people that would just be leaving. And people in other states would charter buses and come out and have treatments from these people. They were really amazing people, really great healers. Dr. Alan Bain and Dr. Ida Harmon were their names. Anyway, so my folks took me to see these people. And I can remember scraping the mud off my shoes, trying to get into their trailer. And it was such a different experience from being in this big multi-million-dollar clinic where they ran all these tests, where they couldn't help me. They had nothing to offer. These people started working on me. And right away, I started feeling better. The pains right away were less severe, less frequent. And within about a month, I had pretty much forgotten that I'd ever been sick. And my parents took me back to the hospital, and they ran all the tests on me. And as I recall, they ran the tests twice, and they said, well, it's a spontaneous remission. And whatever we did must have helped. But I knew, I was only 13 years old, but I wasn't stupid. I knew that these people had actually helped me. So I decided at that time, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a healer, and if I need to practice out on the edge of town in the middle of a wheat field, in a trailer house, hey, that's fine with me. Because those doctors seemed to know what was going on with me, and they seemed to know what I was doing. As far as I knew, at age 13, doctors that were found in trailer houses out in wheat fields on the edge of town, that seemed to be their natural habitat of doctors that got results, right? As far as I knew.
Man, I want to see a doctor in a treehouse. Just imagine what they could do for you.
I did see a doctor in a treehouse once. It was in Hawaii. Yeah, I'd hurt my back and found a chiropractor, and he actually, I remember I was waiting in his office, and it was on the north shore of Oahu, and he actually climbed up the tree and then all of a sudden hopped into the open window from the tree into the waiting room. And I thought, okay, I'm in the right place.
This is my doctor.
Exactly.
What kind of things did the osteopaths do to you? I mean, I'm imagining some form of almost like osteopathic or chiropractic adjustments, but what else did they do to help you heal your body so that your kidneys functioned again?
Well, mainly they were realigning my spine, and they ultimately ended up giving me various different kinds of potions and concoctions that they had put together. But that's mainly what it was back then. I had misalignments going on in my spine that were interfering with the communication between my brain and my kidneys, that weakened my kidneys. And so they started realigning things for me. And yeah, it was amazing how well it worked. I mean, really, it was the change in my body was something that was very obvious to me, something that I could really feel. So that's what happened back then. And so then time went on, and in 1980, I went to I spent a semester at Brigham Young University Hawaii campus, which is in Laie on the North Shore of Oahu, and that's how I met that chiropractor that came in through the window. And anyway, I took a class in computer programming, and man, that was just something that I just immediately took over my life. Computer programming. I became a computer programmer, And as time went on, I used to do consulting. I had a business. I called myself the Computer Tutor, which I thought was really clever. Back in the time, in the early 80s, when people would buy computers for their business and they'd have absolutely no idea what to do with it, and it would just sit there. So they'd hire me to come in and look at their business and program things and get things set up. So that's what I did. And I really, really loved that. There was something about computers that appealed to the perfectionist in me. If I wrote a program and it wasn't actually perfect, it wouldn't work. And so that had a great appeal. So what happened was time went on, and I decided, at the time I was going to Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, eventually, and studying studying various different things. But I was about 6 months away from going into the MBA program to get my master's in business. And I had decided that's the direction I was going to go. And I had this dream of going into the healing arts years before, but I kind of lost sight of that. So my wife and I went back to Montana, where I'm from, and we were sitting around with my folks. It was Christmas time, 1983. And out of the blue, my dad said to me, he said, "Are you sure that you don't want to go to chiropractic school? Because it seems like such a great career and you've always wanted to do it." And I said, "No, I'm going this other direction." And he said, "Well, why don't you think about it one more time?" So I said, "Oh, okay." So my wife and I made up a pro and con list. On the one hand, getting an MBA and going to work for, some big company. And then on the other side, going into the healing arts. And if you've ever done a pro and con list like that, I mean, there were appealing things on both sides, and doing that exercise didn't really help me. But having learned years before that there's a higher power that you can draw upon, that night I got on my knees and I prayed. And I just said, "Father in heaven, if you have anything to say about this, help me to know what to do, because I'm kind of on the middle of the fence now. I could go either way and be happy." So that night, I was awakened 3 different times. And when I would wake up, it would almost be like I'd been having a dream, but it was an unremembered dream. But I would wake up and my mind would be full of all these thoughts of how great it is to be able to help people naturally and heal people naturally and serve people and so on. And I would think, well, yeah, that's true. But then on the other hand, the computers and, when I'd fall back asleep. And that happened 3 times that night. So I'm still not convinced the next day and still don't know what to do. So that night I'm on my knees again and I'm praying and asking God, help me to figure this out, because I still don't know what to do. Kind of thick-headed, apparently. And so that night, the second night, I had this experience where I was awakened again 3 different times, like the night before. But on the second night, each time that I was awakened, the thoughts that I had when I was awakened, the feelings that I had were, if you can imagine, they were really exponentially more powerful each time. So that on the third night, on the second night, on the third time that I was awakened, it was overwhelming. The thoughts of service to mankind and humanity and the whole planet. I mean, it was absolutely overwhelming. And right then, I heard a voice that spoke to me as clearly as I'm speaking to you right now, Ashley. And it said, "This is a sacred calling." And I thought, okay, I get it. Thank you. And so that was it. I never looked back. And when I got into practice, I figured, well, God's gotten me into this. Maybe he'll help me now. And so I developed this habit. And the habit was that before I would go to work on someone, I would just take a moment and just ask for help. I just say, "Father in heaven, please help me to help this person. Help me to know what they need. In Jesus' name, amen." Basically like that. And it was a totally private, totally personal habit. Nobody ever knew that I was saying a prayer for them, but I was. And it was just a momentary pause, really. But I'll tell you something. I absolutely know for a fact that higher power, whether you refer to it as God or Father or Jesus or the creator or source energy or whatever you want to call it, that higher power is real and knows what we're doing and is aware of our lives. Because there were times back then when somebody would come in to see me and I didn't know sometimes what to do. I didn't know how to approach this problem. I didn't know what to do, didn't know how to help this person. And in response to that silent prayer, the information that I needed would just flood into me like an avalanche of understanding. And sometimes it would be a totally different way of looking at things than I'd ever considered before, and that nobody else had ever considered before either. And so basically, I was in practice for 17 years in a brick and mortar practice, and for about another 2.5 years in a distance practice. And I had that habit all those years, and nobody ever knew. It was a totally private thing. Now I teach it as part of what I teach to people, how to use the emotion code, how to use the body code. It's part of what you do and what we teach people all over the world. That it's an important thing. Whatever you believe, it's not a denominational thing. It's just that if you believe in a higher power, well, then you'd be silly not to ask for help because you can get it. It's available for the asking. So one of the most powerful things that I learned during those years was that all of my patients, no matter how old or young they were, no matter what they were suffering from, whether they were dealing with migraine headaches or neck pain or back pain or knee pain or infertility or asthma or digestive problems or depression or anxiety or phobias or panic attacks, PTSD or eating disorders or self-sabotage of some kind, I saw the gamut. And all of those people had something in common, and it was that they were suffering from what you might call emotional baggage. And, we use that phrase, emotional baggage, right? And we usually use it in reference to somebody else. We usually say things like, that guy's really got a lot of emotional baggage. And it's true. The thing is, we all have emotional baggage. But what I learned is that our emotional baggage is actually a real thing, that our emotional baggage is a lot more concrete than we have ever thought. And to understand how this works, you have to understand what the body really is. And if you look at your hand, for example, that hand looks pretty solid. You can slap it down on your desk, it makes a nice thunk sound. But if you were to put your hand under a big microscope, like say an electron microscope, and if you were to keep zooming in and magnifying your hand more and more and more, pretty soon you'd be looking at cells, and then pretty soon you'd be looking at the parts of the cell, then pretty soon you'd be looking at the DNA, and then pretty soon you'd be looking at individual molecules, and then pretty soon, eventually at somewhere between 1 million and maybe 850 million times magnification, eventually you're looking face to face at a single individual atom. And if you keep magnifying a little more, you see inside the atom, there's really nothing in there. It's empty space. And our bodies are pure energy. Now, we think of energy and we think of matter, and we think that they're different, but they're really not. Albert Einstein said that there really is no matter, that all that matter is energy that has had its vibration slowed down enough to a point that we're actually able to perceive it. And so that's what our bodies are. Our bodies are made of pure energy. And some quantum physicists actually figured out recently that you could easily, because our bodies are energy, you could easily put all 7.8 billion people on Earth into a little box the size of a sugar cube, and there would be room for even more. If you could take all of the empty space out of these bodies of ours. So it's a strange thing, really, our existence and these bodies of ours, that they are really more of a force field than anything else. But if you talk to any quantum physicist, they'll all tell you that is absolutely the truth about our existence, which is hard for us to wrap our heads around, but that's the truth of our reality. the truth of our existence. So anyway, sometimes we feel intense emotions. Sometimes our parents are arguing and we're little and we're crying ourselves to sleep at night. Sometimes we're in high school and we go through a breakup and it's devastating. And sometimes somebody close to us dies or is sick, or sometimes we have a bad job, or who knows? We have all kinds of things that go on, and we experience all kinds of emotions. And emotions are a tremendous gift. If we didn't have emotions, our life, I don't think our lives wouldn't be worth living. I think our life would just be a flat line. So we have these emotions, and we have positive ones like joy and happiness and so on, but we also have negative ones, and it's the negative ones that tend to cause the trouble for us. Think about a time in your own life when you were really upset about something. Maybe it wasn't that long ago. Maybe it was today. Maybe it was last week. Were there things that you went through in your life that were difficult? Did you ever used to cry yourself to sleep at night? Or were you ever abused? Or did you ever go through anything that was difficult to bear? And the reality of it is the vast majority of people, with few exceptions, have gone through emotionally difficult things. Now, the problem is when you're feeling an intense emotion of anger, or maybe it's resentment or frustration or grief or sadness, whatever it might be, when you're feeling an emotion like that, if you're feeling it powerfully enough, your whole being, that whole energy field that is who you are, can be resonating and vibrating with that particular frequency. So sometimes what happens is that emotion can be too powerful, and it can actually then become lodged in the body. And this is emotional baggage. We refer to this as trapped emotions. A trapped emotion is a ball of energy that is from about the size of a baseball to about the size of a softball, and these become lodged in the body. And they can lodge anywhere in the body, and then they will cause a couple of different effects. They will cause physical effects. They will tend to cause pain, is one of the big effects that they tend to cause. But they can also, again, when I was in practice and I had all kinds of people suffering from all kinds of different problems, I found that emotional baggage or trapped emotional energies were often at the root of all of these problems. So to give you an idea how this can work, there was a man that came in to see me many years ago, and he had really severe low back pain. It was a 9 on a 0 to 10 scale, he said. He rated himself. And if it's a 10, you go to the ER. And he was a 9. So he was in a lot of pain. And I tested him using the emotion code. And with the emotion code, what we're able to do is we're able to very simply, very easily tap into the subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is where all the good information is. It's the part of you that is keeping track of everything that's ever happened to you in your life. It's the part of you that remembers everything you've ever done, every face you've ever seen in a crowd, everything you've ever eaten or tasted or touched or smelled, all the emotional energies that have gotten trapped in your body. So I'm testing him, and I find he has a trapped emotion. The emotion is anger. And testing a little bit further, I found this had occurred about 20 years before. And he immediately spoke up and remembered what had happened. And he said it was a work situation. He had been falsely accused of something and was really angry about it. And that was the emotion. That was what created this trapped emotional energy in his body. So I released that trapped emotion, and his pain level went from a 9 to a 0 in the snap of a finger. Boom. Just, it was gone. It was unbelievable. And he kept bending over and walking around in my office and twisting this way and that way and exclaiming he couldn't believe it. It was like a miracle, really, and I was grateful that it worked so well. And why did that happen? There's two parts really to this story, but the first part is the pain relief that this guy got. And why did that happen? Well, you see, when you have a trapped emotion, it literally is a ball of emotional energy. And what it's doing is it's distorting, it's residing somewhere in your body, and it's distorting the normal energy field of your body. And when the normal energy field of your body is distorted, that's all your body is, ultimately, is an energy field. And so this guy had a trapped emotion of anger. It was in his low back. And after 20 years of having all of those tissues distorted by that anger energy, eventually it was causing severe pain. But with the release of that trapped emotion, the pain was gone. So because that distorting force that emotion was creating in those tissues suddenly was gone. Well, the story didn't end there. A couple of days later, he came back in to see me for a follow-up visit. And he said to me, he said, my back pain is still gone. He said, I still can't quite believe it. But he said, I have to tell you something. He said, when I came in here, I had another problem that I didn't tell you about. He said, for as long as I can remember, I've basically been what you would call a rageaholic. He said, I'm always yelling at my wife and my kids. He said, I've got to watch the road rage. I've been to anger management several times. Hasn't really helped me. He said, I'm just an angry person. I'm just kind of on edge all the time. But he said, since you worked on me and you released that emotion of anger, he said, I feel really different. He said, things that would set me off before don't set me off now. He said, I feel kind of relaxed and I feel a certain level of peace. And he said, how did you do that? How does that work? And at the time I said, well, I really don't know. I just work here. But here's what we believe, okay? Think about this. And this is, I believe, the actual truth about emotional baggage. This guy's got this ball of energy, this ball of anger in his low back, which seems very strange, but I'm telling you that's how this works. And it's distorting the energy field in his low back until eventually it's bad enough that he comes to see me. But over all of those 20 years, it has altered his personality. Because when a situation would come along in his life where he might tend to become angry, he would become angry much more readily, much more easily. Why? Because part of his body is feeling that emotion of anger 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Because you see, every emotion is a frequency. It's an energy. And it's a particular vibration. And so, because part of his body was already vibrating at that frequency, that vibration of anger, it was easy for him to fall into that resonance. And that's why, after 20 years, he believed that he was an angry person until that trapped emotion was released. And so that's a great example, you see, of what our emotional baggage does to us and how it affects us. And it's such an incredible thing. Sometimes people have physical injuries that leave them with pain for years and years and years. And by removing their emotional baggage, sometimes that just disappears, even though it was a physical injury in the beginning. In fact, just a couple of days ago, we post a new testimonial every day on our site. We have far too many that we can actually post. Our site is at discoverhealing.com, by the way. And I'm looking at our site, and there's a testimonial I want to share with you. This was from February 2nd this year. A woman named Sabrina from Valbonne in France said, 20 years ago, I had a big car accident with 2 whiplashes in a row. It was very painful, and for years I had substantial neck problems and vertigo. The agony became worse over the years, and because I had children, I could not get any rest. Eventually, 5 years ago, my body collapsed with neuralgia, and I had to stay in bed for days. Neuralgia is nerve pain. The pain was so intense that I went to see several doctors and chiropractors, but did not help. It did not help very much. Sometimes it was so excruciating that they could not even touch me. Then I heard of the emotion code, and it was like a miracle. I healed myself. Today I can play tennis, run, look after my kids, and work once again. This method saved my life. Many thanks. I want to share it with everyone who is in pain because I know how much things can improve. So there's a great example of that, right? Somebody who had a really bad car accident 20 years ago, and using the emotion code on herself, she was able to apparently get out of pain. She says it saved her life.
I'd be curious to know if, and maybe you wouldn't know maybe from her, but from others, was the trapped emotion about the car accident, or did she create the car accidents because of trapped emotion? The reason why I bring that up is one of my past mentors was getting in a series of fender benders until she realized that she was creating them. It was other people hitting her, but there was like so many, it was like 12 of them, so many of them,
Yeah.
that she realized, like, 'cause she was very spiritual and did a lot of emotional work herself, master practitioner and trainer of neurolinguistic programming, and she saw in herself when she went back and went, okay, why am I creating this? Like, what's my belief system? What's going on? She
Hmm.
realized that she was creating them because of the emotional distress she was having around her job, and how much her unconscious was fighting her because it was completely going against her value system. It was going against staying in that job, was going against every fiber of her being, but she kept shoulding herself like golden handcuffs, like I should
Hmm.
stay here. And so she was creating these disruptions to basically not go to work, but there's a lot of emotions around her work, around feeling neglected and abused, and so she had to work on that, and then and get away from the job, work on the emotion, and then she stopped creating car accidents. But she thought,
Hmm.
isn't this interesting that some people, like, if you get out of victim mode in life, right? I really always have to preface this when I talk about being victim versus being at cause. I'm in no way saying that, like, rape victims created it for themselves. Like, this is just an exercise, and it's a mental exercise. But
Hmm.
if you can take on the mental exercise of being at cause in your world versus being a victim of things that have happened to you, then you,
Hmm.
from the standpoint of being at cause, you can go like, what, so why did I create that? And not for blame, but more for like, what's going on at the unconscious level that I put myself in this position to be in this accident, even if someone else hit me,
Yep.
right? What's going on? Can I own this from the standpoint of what can I learn from it? How can I grow from this? And what is there for me to learn here? Is there something that happened in my life that had me put myself in this situation? Because all of our conscious and unconscious choices have led us to where we are today. And so if we own them, and then we can learn from them, and then we can look back and go, oh, maybe this is connected to these the emotions that were happening, that the turmoil, or the unresolved issues that were happening prior to the accident. So I just wonder if in her
Hmm.
situation, if she couldn't heal fully from the neck pain because emotions that created during the accident, like feeling the injustice of being in a bad accident, or
Hmm.
was it that she was having issues with motherhood, with her husband, whatever, dissatisfaction in her life, whatever stuff was happening before the accident, and it was she was still, her body was holding on to that pain, the from the injury, for years later, because she hadn't worked on it. So I would just be interested to know,
Yeah.
like, what is the root cause in a lot of cases when it comes to an injury that lasts for years? Is the root cause prior to the injury oftentimes, or is it the emotions from that injury itself?
Yeah, it depends. I would, if I had to bet, I would say that probably, probably there was some emotional baggage that helped to precipitate the accident. When we have trapped emotions, what they do is they send out. They're continually broadcasting their vibration out into the universe, and so then that tends to draw things to us that tend to create more of that. The other thing that happens is when you have an injury, uh, the emotions that you go through, the intense emotional experiences that you go through after that, for years or decades, they will often tend to become trapped in that area and make the distortion worse. So that
Mm.
a great example of this is a guy that I worked with many years ago. This guy came into my office. His name was Steve, and he came in with his wife, and he had really severe tennis elbow. And I mean, his arm was in a sling, and he couldn't turn the keys to start his car. It was so excruciating. And and I was barely able to touch the area. There was so much pain there. And so I started working with him and doing the normal chiropractic things, and wasn't having too much success with it. And so at the time, I was just learning about the emotional side of this, learning about trapped emotions. So I asked his subconscious mind, and we use muscle testing of different types to get answers from the subconscious, and it's all taught in the we teach it very clearly in the emotion code book. So I asked his subconscious mind, is there a trapped emotion that is contributing to this tennis elbow? And the answer immediately was yes. And what I found was that he had a number of trapped emotions that had become lodged in that area of his elbow during the years that he was in high school. Now, he was I think he was 42 years old when I was seeing him. And so he'd been out of high school for a long time. But it was funny because every trapped emotion had to do with a girl who had basically rejected him. And it was so funny because his wife was sitting there, and I'm muzzle testing him, and he's saying, well, let's see, was it Sheila? His arm would go down. No. Okay. Was it Cheryl? No. Shauna? Oh yeah, that one's strong. Yeah, Shauna. Yeah, she dumped me. And so it was all these trapped emotions about that. So here's the thing. He was on the tennis team in high school. So what's happening is, as he's dating these girls and they're rejecting him, he's also playing tennis, and he's incurring micro trauma, right, to those muscles that that are being used the most, and so that's where the trapped emotions would lodge. And the interesting thing about it is, I think there were six different trapped emotions that needed to be released. The story's in the book, actually. It was so funny. But the funny thing, the amazing thing really, is that every time we'd release a trapped emotion, the pain level would just instantly drop. Mm-hmm. And the pain level just kept dropping and dropping and dropping with the release of each trapped emotion, until finally we cleared the last trapped emotion, and the pain was completely gone. And he couldn't believe it. He took the sling off and he's moving his arm around, and I could go in and I could press deeply into those muscles. There was no pain anymore. And I remember that was the first time that I had seen this phenomenon where you can have more than one trapped emotion in one place. But that was a great example to me of how trapped emotions can accumulate in an area, and they can eventually cause extreme pain. So what we find now is that about 90% of all the physical pain that people have is actually due to their emotional baggage, to trapped emotions. And we've got almost 7,000 practitioners of the emotion code now in 80 countries around the world. And we're all finding the same thing, that if you're in pain, there's a very high probability that that pain is actually due to some emotional baggage. Mm-hmm. It's actually really simple.
Absolutely. So I'm a master practitioner and trainer of neurolinguistic programming, timeline therapy, and hypnosis. And back in 2005, my mentors were enamored with the book Healing Back Pain, and that
or Dr. Sarno.
Yeah, Sarno. Mm-hmm. So what he discovered, unfortunately, he has passed away. I tried to get him on the show, but he had passed away. He discovered, because he was working, and I don't know if I don't think he was a medical doctor. I feel like, this was back in 2005, I read the book, but he was doing work with hospitals and looking at the records and seeing that in more administration work, seeing that looking at all the administration stuff, seeing that all these back surgeries, these patients were still, having pain. We got rid of their bulging disc. We surgically removed it. Why do they still have pain? Why are they still on disability? Yeah. Or why are they still in these drugs? And so he started to look at stuff and found that, like, I can't even remember the statistic right now. I wish I could remember off the top of my head, but it was so crazy. Something like 70% of, all the MRIs they do, there's some form of bulging disc, and yet people are asymptomatic. And he's like, how can we have someone who has a bulging disc has no pain? And then, but when people have pain in their back, we always assume it's a bulging disc. And so we do these scans and then we blame the disc and then we remove the disc, but they still have pain. So it's not the disc. So what is it? And then he just dove in like you did, figuring it out. And what he saw was that there was ischemia, which is a cutoff of blood flow to the muscles when there was an emotion withheld. And so I had a client come to me. This was 2006. So still a long time ago. She was a long distance runner. She was in a lot of pain. She was very fit and she was in her 50s, closing in on her 60s. And she said, I'm on Tylenol 3 every day and I really don't want to be on it because, it's not exactly good for you. And when I started talking to her, I was like, well, how long have you had the pain? And she's like, oh, a few years, maybe 4 or 6 years. And as we kept going back in her history, it's like her brain couldn't fully accept or remember. It actually been more like 15 years that she had been in pain and been on these drugs. And it was just like, she's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize how much time had passed. But what I got to the root cause, because guilt kept coming up as we talked. And what we figured out was she had she's Catholic and she had an abortion and she felt so guilty about it. And she said to herself, I have to pay for this guilt with pain. She actually said that. She wouldn't allow the doctor to give her pain medicine during her abortion. And she said, I have to pay for it with pain. And she did. But what was interesting, because I was also in Canada, I was a registered massage therapist and worked in rehab, in sports medicine. And so I said, before we started our session, I said, can I palpate your back? Because she was pointing sort of towards the quadratus lumborum on the left side. And I palpated, and on the left side, it was hard as a rock, ice cold. Now this was in Florida. I was living in Florida at the time. I mean, it's warm. And on the right side, it's flush. It's very good color. It's warm and palpable. But on the left side, it's like I'm touching granite. And I thought, this is interesting. This is ischemia. Like, this is the whole muscle is just not letting any blood flow in. And that's incredibly painful. And of course, when bands of muscle cause ischemia around the innervation of the nerve, it will create just incredible pain. Sometimes it'll travel, the pain will travel to different areas, but it's very painful. And as she gets into talking about guilt, the pain goes up. I keep asking her, where's your pain level? Now, I mean, my session with her was like 6 hours long. Sounds like your section would have been like 6 minutes. Your program sounds like maybe it's more effective in that it sounds a lot quicker. But, by the end of it, we released, the negative emotion of guilt at the root level. And I said, where's your pain? And I'm kind of expecting it to be less. She's like, it's gone. She's like jumping up and around. She's like, how is it gone? And so she goes back to her hotel room, and I didn't tell her to do this because I'm not a doctor, but she flushed all of her meds down the toilet. She was on like 3 meds. One of them was an anti-anxiety med. And she came to me and she said the next day, she's like, I'm off. I took myself off all my meds. I'm not on the pain meds. I'm not on the anti-inflammatory meds. I'm not on the anxiety meds. She goes, I feel like $1,000,000. I feel amazing. And her pain was still gone. I'm like, can I touch your back? And her back, both sides were warm and palpable. And that was the most amazing thing for me to see, that someone physically, that their muscles were holding. I mean, and like you said, the size of a softball or a baseball, her entire quadratus lumborum, which is quite a big muscle, her entire one, so bigger than a softball, was hard and ischemic and cold and holding on to guilt for like 15 years. Yeah. And that to me, which just blew my mind, how many people are on meds that are and emotional medication, right? And also physical medication, and suppressing and putting a Band-Aid on and just sort of like just pushing it down and pushing it down and pushing it down, and then poisoning their bodies, but they're not free of it. They're and that affects every area of their life. Just like one of your clients who, the anger spilled over into every area of his life, and her guilt spilled over into every waking moment of her life. And so just to be free of that. So I'm so excited that people can learn your technique through your book, and they can also then train. Can anyone become a practitioner of the emotion code?
Yes, anybody can become a practitioner. There's really no prerequisites. It's a simple program. It's a 6 month program. Most people do it in about half the time. And if you're interested, there's more information there. Discoverhealing.com is our website. Listen to this one. This is because this just never ceases to amaze me. But here's one that came in from a guy named Robbie Kuipers from Posterholt in the Netherlands. This was posted on the 3rd, so today's the 9th. Anyway, he said, one night I woke up with a terrible toothache. It was around 2 a.m. and I couldn't sleep anymore. I was suffering so much I was about to call the emergency desk and go to the hospital. It felt dreadful. Then suddenly the question popped into my head. Could there possibly be some trapped emotions causing this horrible pain? So I gathered all the willpower I could find, jumped out of bed, and started sway testing for trapped emotions. And that's where you stand up and your body will sway forward for yes and backward for no. And yes, I had some trapped emotions that were causing the tooth pain. With the release of each emotion, my toothache instantly subsided. With the 5th and last emotion released, the pain was practically zero. I then went to bed feeling on top of the world, knowing the power of the emotion code. So,
That's amazing. I love it. Yeah, and the unconscious mind controls all of our muscle movements. And so I've seen that. I've seen it where you can ask your unconscious mind questions and it can control the micro muscle movements of a finger or an arm, or like you said, the sway test. If someone is in a wheelchair, there's other ways that you can do it because the unconscious mind controls the muscles of the body. And so you can communicate with it, which is, I mean, not that many people know. And I was always afraid of my unconscious mind when I began to study and learn more and dive into it. And then once I developed a relationship with my unconscious mind, it was actually the most rewarding thing because it's you, it's the rest of you. It's the rest of you and your unconscious mind.
Yep.
It's just you. It's just more of you, but it's the rest of you that loves you. Your unconscious mind adores you, loves you, wants to keep you safe, wants to keep you healthy. And that's why, I mean, trying to understand John E. Sarno's philosophy behind why is it the unconscious mind creates this ischemic pain. And I'm not saying it's always ischemic pain because, like you've mentioned, it can be injuries and joints and things like that. Although I'd love your opinion. But I guess the hypothesis is that the unconscious mind wants to resolve these issues, and so it's bringing it to your attention.
Well, that's exactly how I look at it. Yes, the symptoms that we have are really just the subconscious mind trying to get our attention so that we can open a dialogue and figure out what's really going on, what the underlying cause of our problem really is. What is it that's unresolved? What do we need to deal with that we've never dealt with? And I love what you said about the subconscious, that it adores us and it is the rest of us. It's absolutely so true. And so, yeah, that's what it is. And it's not just pain. Listen to this one. This is another one. This was posted on February 8th, I guess yesterday. This woman, Susan from Utah, wrote in. She said, my husband, John, recently went through radiation therapy for prostate cancer. One of the side effects has been a terrible itching that would not stop after his therapy. His radiation doctor said that John could be allergic to something new, but didn't think the medication he had prescribed was doing it. John went to a dermatologist and was told that all older men get dry skin, and that was it. I had recently read the emotion code, and I tried it on his itching. The next day, he completely stopped itching. In his eyes, this was a miracle. So you never know. You can try it on anything.
Right. Well, the thing is, we have all day long, we have emotions, all day long, we have experiences. And how often do we actually sit back and unpack those experiences and process those emotions and digest them like you would digest a very healthy meal? It's kind of like we're taking care of our bodies. And so many of the people who are listening would sit down and eat a beautiful, very nutritious meal and chew each bite till it's fully digested and really bathe themselves in nutrition, give themselves the time and the space and the peace to digest their food because they know nutrition is so important. And yet when it comes to our emotions, we kind of treat it like we're going through the drive-through and just scarfing it down and, not even tasting it and then just like throwing it back and expecting our body just to deal with it. And it's so funny that we're kind of like just treating our body like we're eating fast food when it comes to our emotions. but we take our physical body so seriously, and we don't take our emotional body that seriously. I also believe there's a stigma, and it depends on your generation. I see younger generation. I'm 40 years old. I'm turning 41, but I'm like, I don't know. I guess I'm, hopefully, my midlife is years to come. But I look at the younger kids, and I see that they're more open to like counseling and therapy, and they're more open to, because there's not a stigma for them like there
Right.
are for the older generations. There was a large stigma around going to counseling. And the thing is that working on your emotions is like going to the gym. You're just going to the gym for your heart and your mind, and just find the right trainer. Right? There's not every trainer out there is going to be the right trainer for you. Not every counselor is going to be the right counselor for you. But I have clients who say that their sessions working with their therapist has been the most rewarding thing possible, because it's just the place they get to unpack, digest,
Hmm.
absorb, process, and release and let go of and understand their emotions and how they react. And then they notice that they stop um just reacting and spewing onto their family and spewing onto their kids. They actually catch themselves, and they take a deep breath, and they're able to then come from a place of communication that has love and has respect, because they processed all the stuff that happened last week and last month, last year, instead of just bottling it up and then spewing at people. This particular idea of sitting down and respecting our emotional and physical body by working with the emotion code, um, I think could be so rewarding. Now back to my question about ischemia. Is it always muscles? Is it always ischemic pain? Or do you find sometimes there's bone pain? I know you mentioned that man had tooth pain. That could have also been a referral pain from a trigger point. Do you think it's always ischemia though, or have you seen it where there's absolute evidence that it's not created in a muscle?
Well, well, yes. I mean, see, the thing about it is trapped emotions can lodge in different areas. They can lodge they can really lodge anywhere. They can lodge in a specific organ. They can,
Mm.
and so the way that we look at it is a little different from Dr. Sarno's, and
Mm-hmm.
I have tremendous respect for what he did and the consciousness that he was able to create for people, that this kind of thing goes on.
Mm-hmm.
But trapped emotions can lodge in different places, and one of the most fascinating things that we see is that they will often form into a wall around the heart to protect the heart from being
Mm.
broken, and we call that a heart wall. And that's one of the most interesting things that we see. And it's not that there's so much with the heart wall. It's not necessarily that we see the ischemic pain so much, although sometimes people do have that. But there's a whole other dimension to it. Anciently, the ancient peoples believed that the heart was the seat of the soul and the source of love and the source of romance and the source of creativity and really the core of our being. And even now, after all these thousands of years, anywhere you go on earth, if it's Valentine's Day or if someone is romancing you, they'll give you a box of something tasty that's probably shaped like a heart. And so these are ancient ideas. I mean, the word heart is mentioned just shy of 1,000 times in the Bible, for example. And there are these scriptures in the Bible that say things like, God doesn't look on the outward appearance of a person. Instead, he looks on the heart. And there's another one that says that as we think in our hearts, so we will be, right? And in the West, we've never really paid much attention to those old ideas because medicine is still very mechanistically oriented, still very rooted in Newtonian physics. And so the heart is just a muscle, and we know it's a muscle. It just pumps blood. That's all it does. And that's how we've looked at it for many, many years. But in the last 20 years or so, there has been new instrumentation developed. and new studies that have been done that show some amazing things. For example, they found that when one person is feeling love or affection for another person, that their heartbeat will become measurable in the brain waves of that other person on an EEG. And they found that their heartbeats will synchronize. And so there's this connection going on between all of us that we have not necessarily been aware of. But what we discovered, what was actually shown to us back in 1998, my wife had a dream, and she asked me to help her decipher her dream. And as I'm trying to do that, all of a sudden I have this experience that I can only describe as a waking vision, where the room that I was in suddenly disappeared, and I'm looking instead at this incredibly beautiful hardwood floor, with this understanding that my wife's heart is underneath this floor. Now, this is one of the strangest things that I've ever experienced. And I don't take drugs. I don't even use caffeine. I mean, I'm very straight that way. But anyway, this lasted for several minutes. And I told my wife what I was seeing and understanding, and she didn't know what it meant either. So we prayed, asked God to help us figure this out. We started muscle testing her. And what we found was that when she was 2 years old, because she was born into a very volatile, very dysfunctional family, she at some point around that age thought her heart was going to break. And so she started building a wall around her heart. And this wall was literally made from layers of her emotional baggage. And so she'd had this wall around her heart all of these years. So we asked if we could start removing these. And it took us a couple of weeks to take down this wall, one emotion at a time. And when the last one was removed, all of a sudden, things really shifted for her because, for one thing, she, with whatever group of friends that she'd ever been with, she never really truly felt like she belonged anywhere. Like she was always the odd person out. Like she always felt kind of expendable. Until that was removed, then suddenly she felt like she belonged. The depression, the anxiety that she had to deal with, that decreased dramatically. And so initially, when we discovered this, or it was really shown to us, it was very much a God thing, trying to get this out into the world, this understanding. Initially, I thought it was maybe just her, that she was the only person on earth that had this. But what we find now is that about 93% of people have this phenomenon going on. It's called a heart wall. And the most recent testimonial that I have about this, we've got about 10,000 plus testimonials on our site. We get new ones every single day. But we'll pick one every day and post it. But this one came in on February 4th. This is from a woman named Fawn, apparently one of our practitioners. She says, from Ohio, she said, my most meaningful experience using the emotion code is with a client named Paul. He's a 70-year-old man who had such a horrific and abusive childhood that he built a heart wall to protect himself. He never married or even had a close relationship. He's had many acquaintances, but no close friends. After our emotion code sessions, he is now transformed. He went out and got his motorcycle endorsement at 70, and now he's actively looking for a lady to enjoy it with him. He simply shines. The transformation is the most amazing thing I've ever witnessed. So you think about this, 93% of people have this phenomenon, this heart wall phenomenon going on. And what it does is it interferes with your ability to really, to give and receive love for one thing, but also to really create the life that you want. Because the best ideas that you'll ever have are not in your brain, they're in your heart, see? And the heart, we know now, is really a second brain. The heart is filled with gray matter and white matter. It really is a second brain. In fact, when scientists a number of years ago looked at the communications along the nerves between the brain and the heart, they found the vast majority of communications were going from the heart to the brain, and they were expecting it to be just the opposite. So one of the first people that I saw after we worked on my wife with this was a nurse that came in to see me. She was 38 years old, and she came in because she had this terrible neck pain that she'd seen a couple of doctors for that hadn't been able to help her. And as I was talking with her, she told me that she was single, and she had not dated in 8 years and was never going to date again. So she's 38, hasn't dated in 8 years. She's basically celibate. And she was an attractive, person. And I said, well, why do you feel this way? What happened to you? She said that 8 years before, she was really deeply in love with this guy who dumped her and broke her heart. And that was it. She hadn't dated since then. And so I tested her, found, sure enough, she had put up a wall around her heart from that breakup. There were 3 emotions, 3 layers making up this wall. We cleared those emotions one at a time. And when the last one was gone, instantaneously, the neck pain was gone. Instantaneously. And so when we see instantaneous pain relief, like in this case, and like in the case with the guy that I told you about in the beginning that had the anger from 20 years before, I think there's more going on than just the ischemia. I think if the ischemia, if that suddenly, if those arteries and veins open up a little bit, it's going to take a little bit of time for things to shift. But we see instantaneous relief of pain in many cases. That's what happened to her. So that's not the end of the story, though. She left the office feeling totally fine and didn't come back for 3 months. When she came back into my office, I'll always remember this. She looked great. And I said, hey, you look great. I haven't seen you for a while. How are you? She said, she said, my neck's been fine since I was here. But she said, you cleared that heart wall for me, and that really works. She said, about 2 weeks after I was here, I found out my childhood sweetheart has been living right around the corner from me for almost 8 years. And she said, we're dating and we're in love. Gosh. And I think he's going to ask me to marry him. Oh. I thought, wow, what a shift. Holy smokes.
You got me fascinated when you said that it can manifest in the organs. We often hear like angers in the liver and fears in the lungs, or the kidneys. So if someone has, I don't know, type 2 diabetes, well, type 2 diabetes is a bad example. If someone has something with their pancreas, right, and an illness with their pancreas, because with type 2 diabetes, it's not necessarily a pancreatic issue, but if someone has an illness with an organ, a known illness, or like fatty liver disease, or they have a traumatic brain injury. Have you seen people take something either acute or chronic that's in an organ that's been, labs diagnosed, been tracking it, seeing that yes, there's an injury or there's a disease state, and they worked on the emotions that were there? Have you seen people, their bodies heal to the point where they've been able to heal organs?
Well, yes. For example, one of the most common examples of that we see is actually infertility, where we find trapped emotions, for example, in the uterus. And by removing those trapped emotions, when we're able to conceive, think about, all the different organs, every disease process. The first thing that you have to understand is that every disease process that people experience has an emotional component every single time. In our experience now, doing this for 32 years, there's always an emotional component. If you identify the emotional component and you release that emotional baggage that's affecting that area, then yes, things turn around, and we've seen it happen over and over and over. So yes, in fact, trapped emotions can even affect they can affect very specific parts of the body. For example, you might have a trapped emotion affecting your pineal gland, or maybe the hypothalamus or the pituitary. You might have trapped emotions that are affecting the thyroid gland. And by removing those, all that this does really is it just removes the encumbrances that are in the body's way of being able to function like the body wants to. The body wants to be healthy. It wants to function normally. But when you've got emotional baggage, those are encumbrances. Those are blockages to really being able to heal and to function normally. In fact, let me tell you, here's a really dramatic story, okay, that I haven't thought of for many, many years. But But in talking about this, it's reminded me of this. There was a woman that came in to see us once who had she had fibromyalgia, which is this pain that you get all over the body that is very difficult and no known cure and so on. And so I was able to help her with that. And then she told us about, she told my wife and I about her daughter. And what had happened with her daughter was that her daughter had gotten married about 6 months before, but her daughter suffered from vaginismus, which is the tightening down of the opening of the vagina. And so she and her husband still, after 6 months, had not been able to have intercourse. They'd never been able to consummate their marriage. And the marriage was starting to show signs of stress. And so she asked if we would look at her daughter. And so we did. So her daughter came in and we checked her. And my wife found on her something that I don't think we'd ever seen before, and I don't think we've ever seen it since. But this girl had what we ended up calling a vaginal wall. So in the sense, if you think about a heart wall, if you feel like your heart is going to break, you're feeling a physical sensation, like there's an elephant sitting on your chest, or maybe like you can't breathe. There's a physical thing going on there. The subconscious mind will put up a wall. The wall is an invisible wall to us, but to the subconscious, it's very, very real, I think. And that wall might be made of, my wife's heart wall was, the symbolic material was wood. She grew up in a house with hardwood floors. So the subconscious will always choose some kind of a material. And we've seen heart wall symbolic materials, everything from plastic to glass to iron. But anyway, this young woman had a wall that her subconscious mind had put up in that area of her body to protect herself. And then she told us that she had been sexually abused at some point as a child. So anyway, we cleared the trapped emotions that were creating that. And it was the next day, her mom called us and she said, guess what? Everything's working. Thank you. And in fact, she said, yeah, her husband is coming home. He's spending his lunch breaks at home now, trying to catch up.
I had a friend who had that, and she had to have a surgery. She surgically had her vaginal opening altered so that she could have intercourse. So that's very interesting that she had the same condition. But it's very interesting that that I mean, and she spent years doing everything. Obviously, she didn't learn about the emotion code. It would have been a lot easier than having a surgery. But
yeah. That was their next step, really. Their next step was surgery.
Right.
So, but luckily, we were able to avoid that.
What about people who have? So I'm just gonna throw this out there. I like to get weird. What about people who are in a coma, who are I don't want to say invalid, but maybe dementia, who maybe children who are nonverbal autistic or adults who are nonverbal autistic? Is there any way to do this technique with people who can't clearly communicate with you? Or
yes, absolutely. It's not a problem at all. In fact, the reason why is because the subconscious mind never sleeps. And so it doesn't matter. Yep. People can be worked on when they're asleep, when they're in a coma. In fact, let me tell you a story. This is actually in the emotion code book, but we have twin boys. My wife and I have had, she and I had 7 kids together, and then she had a daughter before we met. So we have a total of 8. But we have twin boys that are 31 years old now. And when they were 4 years old, we thought that one of them had a problem with his hearing because he wouldn't speak in full sentences. His brother, on the other hand, was a total chatterbox, but he wouldn't speak in full sentences. And we just didn't know what was wrong. And so we took him to a hearing specialist thinking maybe he was a little bit deaf. But his hearing was totally fine. And so at that time, we were really first learning about trapped emotions. And so one night we decided to work on him when he was asleep. Now, in the book, we explain how you do this, and it's a simple process, but we worked on him when he was asleep, and we found that he had an inherited trapped emotion of anger from my wife's father. So in other words, when my wife was conceived in the womb, there was emotional energy of anger that was passed from grandpa. And then when we conceived this little boy of ours, that energy was passed to him. And so we cleared that, released that. He's asleep, so we're working on him when he's asleep. No problem. The subconscious never sleeps. And we cleared a couple of other trapped emotions. And the next morning at breakfast, guess who will not shut up? And my wife and I are just looking at each other like a couple of owls, like we just cannot believe what's happening. And so we all have emotional baggage, and getting rid of it is so important. And if you think about it, if you've got a heart wall, and there's about a 90% chance that you do, then what that's doing is it's interfering with your ability to give and receive love, and your ability to really create the life that you want, because your best life and the best creative ideas that you have are actually in your heart. They're not in your head. So the beautiful thing about the emotion code is that it's really, really simple. Anybody can do it. Kids can do it. We have kids that are having great success with it, in different parts of the world. And you can learn how to do it yourself. You can use it yourself, use it on your own kids. You can use it on your husband, on your wife, on your children, and so on. And
can you do it with babies?
You absolutely can do it with babies. You can even do it with babies before they're even born.
Ooh.
When they're in the womb, you can work on them.
Oh my gosh. That's so cool. I'm 32 weeks pregnant, so I better start.
Oh, yeah.
I better start reading. Can you do it with animals?
You absolutely can do it with animals. In fact, let me see. There was a story that I was just looking at here on our site. Let me see if I can find that really quick.
I consider myself an open-minded skeptic, like a really, really open-minded skeptic. And I wouldn't be prompted to ask that question if I hadn't had an experience where a friend of mine asked me to do emotional work on her dog, and I'm like, I'll try. And this dog, they're basically, the dog's parents are splitting up. The two owners were going their separate ways. And the dog was picking up on the tension, and it was a wiener dog. And all of a sudden, his back legs stopped working. He became paralyzed. And the vet said, this is, common with wiener dogs. But there was no trauma. Like, there was no, he didn't fall down or get kicked or hurt, he didn't bump himself. He just, all of a sudden, his parents are splitting up. There's tension in the household, and now he isn't working. And so I sat with him. I held him in my hands, and I just started, my heart communicating to his heart. And all of that information came flooded to me. And I'm like, okay, well, let's fill you with love and get you to see that your parents love you, and you're going to be in their lives, and they're just, you get to have two homes now. They're going to share you, your parents are getting divorced, but you still have them. They're not leaving you. They're just leaving each other. And we all, the three of us, were talking to him and telling him that. And then he got up and started wagging his tail, and his legs worked again. And we're like, okay, that works. So, awesome. And I've heard, I've had other people on the show who are healers who had, one guest of mine helped a horse with her fertility issues. She was having she was having miscarriages, basically. And this horse wasn't able to conceive. And so he did emotional work with the horse, and the horse was able to heal from the emotions of all the sadness from the lost pregnancies. And then the next one, worked and she was able to get pregnant. And I'm like, okay, you know what?
Yeah.
There's something very interesting going on here. Of course, animals have emotion. If you've ever had a cat or
Yes.
dog, you know, like you make a connection with them, and there's more there. There's love. There's acceptance. There's joy. They have some very interesting emotions, and they there's so many studies done now where they can actually see that animals have emotions. Um, I'm not doing a debate as whether they have a soul or not, or whether they go to heaven or not. I mean, those are all very interesting conversations to have. But the fact is that if we as humans can, and we're animals too, but if we can heal physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and energetically by using the emotion code and working on our emotions and healing them, why not animals? And I love that you said
Mm-hmm.
we can work with babies and work with like I just imagine the parents who have autistic children who like are nonverbal
Uh-huh.
could be doing this with their
Yep.
children. How
Yes.
beautiful is that? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so sorry, you had a testimonial about working with animals?
Oh, right. Well, yeah, this one just came in. This is from a woman named Beata in Germany. This came in on the 1st of February, I guess. She said, Lily, the dog of a family friend, suddenly no longer wanted to go up the stairs in her home and only managed to do so with a lot of startup and motivation from her owner. Nothing seemed to be wrong physically. By the time my friend shared this with me, sitting together in a cafe, it had been going on for a long time. So, right there, I connected remotely with Lily the dog and released a few of her trapped emotions. When my friend got home that afternoon, Lily ran up the stairs without any complaints. A few days later, when her fear of stairs came back, I was able to solve a few more things. Now Lily has no more problems walking up the stairs. And what's interesting about this one, too, is that this was done at a distance. And of course, that's because this is energy medicine, really, in its purest form. And so, yeah, it's not bound at all by distance. And so that's a fun one, huh?
Right. When you start studying quantum physics, you realize we're all in the milieu together. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if we're 1,000 miles away or 1 foot away from each other. We have this energetic connection, and I just love that. I saw the movie. It blew my mind. It completely changed my life. My life took a 180 after I saw the
Mm-hmm.
movie. What the bleep do we know?
Mm-hmm.
Because I went like, oh my gosh, we like there this energy, like we're stop thinking in terms of chemical and matter. Think in terms of energy. It's all about energy.
Yeah.
And so that just makes total sense that, emotions are energy and having them trapped in the body. Very interesting. You lived and went to school in Hawaii for a while. I studied
Mm-hmm.
Huna because I thought, the ancient Polynesian technique, and I wouldn't even call it a religion because it was more like their lifestyle. It was how they breathed, how they loved, how they healed, how they fished. It was Huna is their philosophy for living. And in Huna, there's a belief. Now, this is hundreds or thousands of years old. Who knows? But it's ancient Polynesian belief system about living and life, and they believe that emotions would become trapped in the body like black boulders stored in bags inside us. Like if you looked at a river and saw a river with no boulders would be calm, but a river with many boulders would be turbulent. And
Mm-hmm.
so they had this idea that the more trapped emotions you had, the more the chi was turbulent within you and was
Yeah.
thrown off. And so I've always carried that imagery in my mind. So of
Hmm.
course we would want to heal and release these these emotions. Now, you've talked about the book, The Emotion Code, but you've also talked about this course. Eh, Could
Mm-hmm.
someone who was very passionate like I am, wanting to do this to all their friends and family, let's say, and themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously the family being receptive, would the book be enough? Would it suffice, or should someone who really wants to do this technique with their animals and their kids and their husband, and their friends, should they take the course? Or who should take the course, and who should read the book?
Well, the information is definitely in the book, and so people all over the world are reading the book, putting it into practice, learning how it works. Um, if you really want to master it, Or if you want to actually charge people for sessions, then we do want you to go through the certification program. The certification program that we have is an online program, and it's available. You can go to discoverhealing.com, and it's actually on sale right now. But it's not an expensive program. It's all online. You go through at your own pace. Most people will go through it in about 3 months. Some people, the record is 2 weeks. So it just depends on how motivated you are. But the nice thing about that is that it gives you rails to run on. I mean, think about it. I know that you've done this because I've done this. I think so many people have done this, where you go to some really great course or something, and you buy some materials, and then a year later you come across them and they're still shrink wrapped, and you think, oh yeah, I really wanted to learn that. And so the certification program gives you some deadlines and enables you to really learn it well and get a lot of practice. And you have a student advisor that helps you and gives you any kind of feedback that you need. But it also is all in the book. So, I mean, if you want to learn it from the book and use it on your friends and family members and so on, by all means, go for it. It's all in there. But if you want that added experience of getting certified, then yeah. And if you want to do it for a living, then we want you to do that for sure.
Well, so why specifically? Because we have a lot of health coaches that listen to the show. I'm sure they're all perked up and like already on your site, ready to sign up. Because this would be a great adjunct to health coaching. What is different in the course, in the live course that's from the book? Are you teaching them sort of the how to work with people, or what to look for, or sort of like precautions, or what is it that you get out of the live course that really helps you work with people on a professional level?
Well, the course consists of 10, in part, it consists of 10 different recordings where, and they're basically presentations where I go through with two of our top practitioners that have been doing this for many, many years. And we discuss and kind of bounce things off of each other in explaining things. So what we try to do is we try to explain it in all of it from the very beginning in a way that makes it very easy for everybody to understand. So that's part of it. You'll gain insights from certification that you won't get from the book, but also in the certification program, you have homework. Your homework actually is the book itself. And so we supply the text of the book and the book on audio for you. And so you've got homework, and then you work on yourself, and you're one of the people. There are, I believe it's 20 people that you have to work with, but you can count yourself as one of those people. And so as you're working with people, and you're releasing trapped emotions, you're recording everything that you're doing online on our site at discoverhealing.com in the back end at a location that's just for you for this. And you record all that information. And then as you're doing that, you do have to work with some animals. You have to totally clear the heart wall from a number of people. And what it does is it accelerates your ability to do this because it's kind of like coaching. I mean, nobody really gets to the Olympic level of any sport without having a coach. It just is, it's not possible. And so that's kind of what this program does. Is it gives you you're able to see videos of other people doing this, and sample sessions that are actually done that our practitioners are doing. So you learn how to do this the right way. You learn how to do it better at at a distance and so on, and then you're quizzed on everything. There really is no final exam. You basically pass off each part of it as you go, and so it builds. Each part builds on the next part. But we have lots and lots of people doing it. It's a great program. We consistently get very, very high 90% feedback from everybody doing it. That that it's a great program. So anyway, yeah, the book itself, if you're just kind of wanting to explore this a little bit, maybe you can go to emotioncodegift.com, and there you can download the first couple of chapters of the book for free. We can give you those for free. You can try those out. If you want to get the book's available on Audible. If you want to listen to it, Amazon.com, of course. Barnes and Noble. Let's see, Barnes and Noble, are they still in business? I think they are.
Yeah, it's Borders that went under.
Borders, yeah. What about B. Dalton? Are they still? I can't remember.
I was so bummed. I where I lived in Vegas, Henderson, Nevada, just off of Stephanie, there was a Barnes and Noble and a Borders practically beside each other. That would be my favorite, like, Saturday afternoon activity. I'd go pour through all of Barnes and Noble, and then I'd pour through all of Borders, and they would actually have different books, and some, depending. I would always go with, like, the self-help, personal growth, and spiritual sections. So that was my shtick, and it was funny. My husband's and my second date was we did that. We went to Barnes and Noble and Borders, and I pointed out every book I ever read, and he bought every book I ever read. He walked to the register with his hands full. He spent hundreds of dollars, and I kind of looked at him. I'm like,
Wow.
this guy's listening to me.
He's serious.
He's serious. This guy's serious. Oh man, yeah, that was cool because that's, he said he was into personal growth, but then he was like putting his money where his mouth was. So that was pretty hot, I'd have to say. But we've been married almost 13 years, so and I pretty much knew almost instantly that there was something special there. So yeah, I miss Borders. But yeah, Barnes and Noble's around, and I still do shop there occasionally. I love that you have an audiobook. I'm absolutely getting your audiobook because I love listening to audiobooks, so I'm excited about that. So any listener can listen to your book or read your book and begin to immediately apply these techniques. They don't have to take the course, but if they want to do it professionally, they should take the course because they're going to get it on a much deeper level. That's so exciting. While I've been interviewing you, I've made a list of at least 12 friends and clients and family members that I want them all to get your book. And so I imagine all the listeners have done the same. And no wonder you're so popular. This is so needed in this world. Dr. Bradley, I really want to have you back on the show. I'd love for you to continue to dive into this topic and explore it. Today was sort of just to get us an introduction, get our foot in the door. And of course, everyone's going to go get the book. And I'm going to definitely go listen to your book. But I'd love to have you on the show, after I've finished the book. And then we can, maybe we can go deeper a bit into this topic. And I know my listeners will absolutely love that, especially since they're all going to go out and get your book too. And of course, they're going to go to emotioncodegift.com and get the gift that you're giving out. Is there anything you'd like to say to wrap up today's interview?
Well, I would just say that we're living in this very unique time of the Earth's history, where the world is in this transformational process. To me, it's almost like the Earth is in labor. It's trying to give birth to this new world where so many of us want it to go, a world where people are living from their heart, and a world that is just so different from the world that we're used to, where darkness has had so much influence over so much that's been done in the world. This work, the Emotion Code, is part of this transformation. It's just a little piece of it, but think about when you read about somebody that is hurting someone else or that's done some terrible thing. You can bet that there's a heart wall there, because you see, we feel with our heart, and that's why if someone is really hurting us or we're really deeply grieved, we feel it in our chest, we feel it in our heart, and the brain that is in our heads doesn't really feel. I mean, using the brain that is in our heads, the extension of that is that, has created the world that we're in now in many ways, where we're still using war to settle differences between nations and dropping bombs and blowing people up and all kinds of crazy things, which seems to the logical mind to be perfectly appropriate. But eventually we are moving now towards a world where we're all going to be living from our heart, you see, where love is going to rule the day. And this work is about helping us to get there. So it happens on an individual level. Get the book, learn how to do this. You can work on yourself. You can work on your family members. You can do so much healing, not only for your own family that's alive, but when you remove emotional baggage that has been inherited and passed down your line, you're releasing it from them as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we might want to talk about that next time, because I've got some great stories I can tell you about
Let's
that.
do that. Awesome. Well, let's have you back on the show and we'll talk about inherited emotions. I have some amazing experiences about that as well. And I totally, again, open-minded skeptic, wouldn't believe it if I hadn't like experienced it with my own, experience. It's pretty amazing that we, and it's been documented actually. They've scientifically proven that that the stress from trauma is passed down,
Yep.
and they've been able to measure it, which is just so fascinating. But you can get very specific, and very specific trauma, very specific emotion can be passed down for generations. And so it's up to us to stop that, to heal it, and to allow the healing to go in both directions, for past generations and future generations. And so I'd love to have you come back on and we can talk about generational healing. And I'd
Mhm.
also like to ask you about past life healing, if that's ever come up. Because that is something that will challenge us in a very
Mhm.
interesting way. Dr. Bradley Nelson, it's had a absolute pleasure having you on the show, and can't wait to have you back. It's truly a gift and an honor to be in this day and age when we are birthing a world and we do our own heal ourselves, heal thyself, help heal our friends and family. And if enough of us are going to tip the scales, we can help birth a world where love and peace and consciousness, um, are the things that we strive towards, the things that we resonate, instead of coming from the heart instead of coming from the mind, like you said.
Yeah. Yep. We're going that direction. Well, thank you, Ashley. It's been really fun. Let's do it again.